Natasha checked the time on her phone screen once again. There were still 2 hours left until the end of the working day when her husband sent her a message. Dina Asu. Andrei Petrovich and his wife will be arriving. Don't be late. The woman sighed heavily and put aside the unfinished report. Victor's business partners again. Endless conversations about business again. Once again, she would sit silently in the corner of the table, smiling tensely. Over 10 years of marriage, such evenings had become a familiar routine. I need to stop by the store, she muttered under her breath. Fruit, wine, fresh greens for the salad. At 37, Natasha felt like an old housekeeper, not the wife of a successful entrepreneur. No children, no career, no personal interests. Just an endless series of household chores and social dinners. Natasha, do you have a minute, Sveta? A colleague peered through the office door. Listen, maybe we can sit after work. We haven't talked for a long time. Sorry, I can't. My husband has important guests. We need to get ready. Natalia answered habitually. Clear. As always. Husband. Home. Cooking. Oh. Girlfriend. Suddenly the phone vibrated again. This time it was her sister Marina calling. Natasha, are you sitting? The voice of her relative sounded unusually serious. What happened? Grandma Polina. She is no longer here. Natalia felt how she instantly had them all over her body. The last time she saw her grandmother was a year and a half ago. When she came to the village for the new year, she was going to visit this summer. But when that was all she could squeeze out. She passed away quietly in her sleep last night. The funeral was the day after tomorrow. Marina was silent, and she still had to go to the notary in a week. Grandma had left a will. The notary's small office was filled to capacity. In addition to Natasha and Marina, their husbands and the lawyer from her sister's side were present. Marina, as always impeccably dressed, nervously tapped her long nails on the table. Her husband, Georgi, leafed through some papers with an important air. Maybe we should get started, the sister said impatiently. I have an important meeting in an hour. So, the notary Semyon Arkadyevich cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses on his nose. According to the last will of Polina Andreevna Voskresenskaya, her property is distributed as follows. A 3-room apartment in the center of Moscow on Chisty Prudy goes to granddaughter Marina Alexandrovna Vorobyova. A house in the village of Berezovka, together with the adjacent plot of land, to granddaughter Natalia Alexandrovna Medvedova. Natalia immediately felt how her husband tensed up next to her. Victor was already making plans for his grandmother's apartment, planning to open a representative office of his company there. Sorry, but there's some kind of mistake here, Marina's lawyer said, straightening his tie. The value of the objects is incomparable. The apartment is valued at a minimum of 20 million. And there's no mistake about the village house, the notary answered calmly. The deceased's will was expressed clearly and unambiguously. Marina smiled triumphantly. What? Sister. Bad luck again. Although, what's surprising? You've been like this your whole life. Always in the shadows. Always silent. Always content with my scraps. Marina. Stop. Natalia whispered quietly. Stop what I'm telling the truth. You couldn't even give birth to a child for your husband. Although, maybe it's for the best. She and Victor drove home in complete silence. Only at the entrance did my husband lose his temper. That, as always, you screwed up. You couldn't even get a normal inheritance. A wreck in a godforsaken village. Is that all you're capable of? Where did you come from? Punishment. Vitya. But it's not my fault. Shut up. I'm tired of being the husband of a loser. Pack your things and get out. Go to your wreck. That's where you belong. And don't call me anymore. You're like a goat giving me milk. You just transfer money. But where will I go? Tears rolled down the woman's cheeks. I don't care. Tomorrow. I don't want your spirit here. That night, for the first time in 10 years of marriage, Natalia slept in the living room. And in the morning, when Victor left for work, she began packing her bags. It was empty and quiet inside. Like that abandoned house she had inherited from her late grandmother. An old bus dropped Natasha off at the only stop in Beryozovka. The woman looked around. The village was deserted. Only an old birch tree by the road waved its branches affably. As if recognizing an old acquaintance, it took her about 20 minutes to walk to her grandmother's house. With each step, the suitcase became heavier and her heart became more anxious. Finally, the woman saw a familiar gate. Leaning to one side, the tall grass in the yard reached her waist. The once well-kept beds were overgrown with grass. "Oh, my God," Natalia whispered. Looking around the house, the paint on the shutters was peeling. The porch was rotten in several places, and only a frame remained of the veranda. She remembered this house differently. Bright, soze, smelling of herbs and fresh pastries. "Natasha, have you finally arrived?" A clear voice rang out. A plump woman in a colorful apron was hurrying from the neighboring yard. "Aunt Valia." Natalia rejoiced, recognizing her grandmother's friend. "When I heard the bus arrive, I thought, I need to look out. We've been waiting for you." Waiting. The women hugged. Aunt Valia smelled of fresh bread and dill. "Just like Grandma used to. Let's go to my place. I have some tea. In your yard now." She hesitated. It hadn't been tidied up for a long time. "Over tea and pies. Aunt Valia told me you're Polina. The kingdom of heaven. To worked with herbs until the very end." People came to her from all over the area. Some for tincture, some for decoction. She didn't refuse anyone. And when she got sick, she gave in quickly. Only about 3 months. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Natalia asked bitterly. She didn't tell them to. "Don't disturb me," she said. She had enough of her own worries. By evening, when the woman finally decided to enter the house, a surprise awaited her. The rooms were clean, as if someone had recently cleaned up. "This is Alenka, the girl from next door," Aunt Valia explained. "She has been looking after your grandmother lately and comes over afterwards." Dusts. Airs out the room. Everything in Grandma's bedroom was as before. Herbs on the ceiling. An old dressing table. A chest of needlework. On the table lay a stack of yellowed envelopes. "My dear granddaughter." The letter, dated last month, began, "By the time you read this, I will be gone. Forgive me for not inviting you to say goodbye. I didn't want to be a burden. You've suffered enough from life. I must tell you the truth. I got the apartment in Moscow from my first husband, Georgy Petrovich. His daughter from his first marriage is your sister Marina's mother. I accepted the girl as my own, but she never forgave her father for his second marriage. And then his granddaughter grew up with the same character. I know that I offended you by leaving the old house instead of an apartment, but here is my soul, my strength. Every blade of grass, every piece of current remembers my hands. Here I was truly happy. In the cellar you will find jars with herbal infusions. This is your inheritance. And in the chest there are notebooks with recipes. Do not rush to throw them away. Take a closer look. Maybe this knowledge will be useful to you too. I love you. My dear girl, Grandma." Natalia sank down on the old bed, clutching the letter to her chest. Outside the window, the apple trees that Grandma had once planted rustled. It smelled of mint and thyme. "Well, how are you settling?" Intuitia Valia appeared in the doorway. "Can I help you with anything? I really want you to feel at home here. We have a good, kind place. Don't run away right away. Take a closer look." "Thank you." The woman smiled through her tears. I'll probably stay. But that's absolutely right. The neighbor nodded happily. The house is good. Strong. A little patching up and you'll live. And we'll help as much as we can. Just don't be sad. Natalia slept peacefully all night for the first time in a long time. She dreamed of a blooming garden, the smell of herbs, and her grandmother's smile. The next morning began with a quiet knock on the door. A thin girl with a light brown braid and big gray eyes stood on the threshold. Hello. I'm Alyona. The girl's voice was quiet and melodic. Can I come in? Of course. Aunt Valia told me about you. Natalia smiled, carefully examining the guest. Alina walked into the house hesitantly. Stopped at the old chest of drawers. Baba Polya used to dry herbs here, laying them out right on the newspapers: mint, oregano, St. John's wort. And I helped sort them. Did you often visit her? The woman asked. Getting her cups from the cupboard. Every day she came running after school. Gave me tea, told me stories. And then the girl faltered. When she got sick, I tried to spend more time here. I couldn't leave her alone. Natalia looked at the guest with annoyance. She considered herself a beloved granddaughter. And in recent months, this modest girl was next to her grandmother. Sit down. Tell me about her. About what she was like lately. Alyona sat down on the edge of the chair, straightened the folds on her skirt. You know, she often remembered you. Showed photos, especially the one where you were little, with pigtails. My Natasha said. She was just as kind, sensitive. She put everything into her soul. The girl looked uncertainly at the new mistress of the house. I was thinking, maybe you need help with herbs. For example, Baba Polya taught me a lot. It would be a shame if everything were lost. Do you really want to help? Natalia looked at the girl carefully. This is time. Energy. I want to. For the first time in the entire conversation, Alyona's voice rang out joyfully. Baba Polya said that herbs are like people. You need to love them. Understand them. I could show you what she gave me. If you don't mind. Of course. Natalia smiled, looking into her serious gray eyes. You know, I have a feeling that Grandma brought us together on purpose. Let's try it together. That's how their friendship began. Every day, Alina came after school, and together they sorted through Grandma's notes. It sorted through herbs, tidied up the garden. Look, this is oregano, the girl explained, pointing to a small bush. Baba Polya said that it was not only good for tea, but also gave strength. And here's St. Plang's. John's wort grows. It helps with 100 diseases. The woman was surprised to discover that she liked this activity. Gradually, she learned all the herbs in the garden, learned to distinguish them by smell and appearance. Let's try making tea, Alina suggested one day. I have a grandmother's recipe. It's called Summer Morning. There are 7 herbs collected in a special way. The first tasting took place at Aunt Valia's house. The neighbors gathered, brought pies and jam. Oh my God! Just like Polina brewed it. Old Nina Stepanovna threw up her hands. The same aroma, the same strength. Can I have a jar of this tea? Asked a young teacher from the local school. I would buy it. That evening, the girl brought a laptop. Natalia Alexandrovna. Let's start a blog. It's trendy now. We'll talk about herbs. Publish Grandma's recipes. What blog? Alyanushka, I don't understand anything about this. I'll help. I took courses on social networks at school. We just need to come up with a nice name. This is how Grandma Polina's herb blog appeared. The first photo. A bouquet of thyme on an old windowsill. Unexpectedly got a lot of likes. By the end of the summer, the garden had been transformed. Neat beds with medicinal plants. A gazebo for tea parties. and a dryer for herbs appeared. In the house, Natalia equipped a special room for packing and storing herbal mixtures. You know, the woman shared with Alina, I never thought I would do this. But now I wake up and feel like I'm alive. It's wonderful. The first big order came unexpectedly. The owner of an eco shop from a neighboring town ordered a trial batch of tea sets. I'm not sure. The packaging just needs to be pretty, the client said, so that the story would be felt. He and Alina spent a whole week coming up with a design, old photographs of grandma, dried flowers, craft paper, ribbons. Thank you for the magical tea. The first customer wrote on the blog, I drink your infusion for insomnia and sleep like a baby. By autumn, the blog already had more than 1,000 subscribers. People wrote, asked for advice, shared stories. Baba Palya used to say that herbs are alive. Aliona said, helping to pack a new batch of tea. You have to talk to them. Thank them. Then they will give you all their strength. One evening, looking through her grandmother's old notebooks, Natalia found a note. The main thing in our business is love for herbs. For people, for the earth. Without love, nothing will work. You know, Natalia, my partner, once said, I think I understood why my grandmother left me this house. I finally found myself here. She knew it would be like this. She felt it. The renovated garden rustled outside the window. Cups of herbal tea steamed on the table. And notifications about new orders appeared on my phone one after another. 6 months passed. There was a knock at the door when the sun was already setting. Natalia tore herself away from her laptop, opened the door, and saw Victor on the threshold. Her husband looked, as always, impeccable. An expensive suit, a confident sled, branded accessories. Only his gaze became different, appraising. Natasha. He smiled, his signature smile of a successful person. You can come in. The woman silently stepped aside. Victor walked into the room, examining the furnishings meticulously. Not bad. Even unexpectedly. Not how I imagined this house. It looks cozy, comfortable, surprised. Frankly, I've been following your development on social networks. Interesting project, growing audience. You've finally become someone more than just a housewife. Why did you come? Natalia asked calmly. You know, I've reconsidered my attitude towards you. Let's just say you've passed the test amazingly, and now you're rightfully worthy of being my wife. Successful, independent, self-sufficient. We could create a great tandem. I'll help take your business to a new level. I'll open the doors to the necessary offices. The woman grinned slyly. That is, when I was a nobody, you kicked me out of the house. And now that I've gotten back on my feet, you suddenly decided that I'm worthy of you. Well, you must admit, you really were a man before. He winced, choosing his words. Let's say, not ambitiously enough. And now you've grown up. You've become interesting. I'm proud of you. Proud of you. Vitya. Or do you really think you can just go back and start over? Why not? I have connections. Money. Experience. Think about the opportunities you're missing out on. No. The wife answered firmly. I'm no longer the woman you can control. And it's not about success or money. I just don't love you or respect you anymore. What Victor's face twisted. You're refusing me. Do you even understand what you're refusing? I understand perfectly well. From a person who values people only by their usefulness and wallet, this option doesn't suit me. Go away. Vitya. And don't come back. There's no point in this. You and I have only one unresolved issue. Divorce. And I intend to deal with it in the foreseeable future. Get lost. Natalia had barely recovered from her husband's visit when Marina arrived in the village a week later. Sister, you're doing great. I look at your feet. You're up. I've been following your blog. Very impressed. Marina. I'm very busy. Say what you need and leave. Oh. Why are you doing this so suddenly? We are relatives. Not strangers to each other. Yes. We could have argued before. But all that is nonsense. Forget it. I am thinking, maybe we should establish a partnership. I have connections. Opportunities. We will open a chain of stores in Moscow. And you will be the main one. And I am just collecting herbs. Natalia interrupted the guest. No. Thank you. I'm fine here. Well, stay in your village. Hissed the sister. Just don't come running later when you're broke. A businesswoman from the collective farm was found here. In the evening, Natalia told Aliona about everything. The girl listened attentively and suddenly suggested, let's open a tea house right here. In the house, you have a big veranda. You can put tables, serve tea, hold master classes. Do you think it will work? Of course. I finished school in the summer. I don't want to go to college. Let's work together. You've become like an older sister to me. Natalia smiled and hugged the girl tightly. And you're like a younger sister to me. You know, this is a great idea. Let's do it. In the spring, Grandma Polina's tea house welcomed its first guests. Antique fourniture, lace napkins, herbal infusions in beautiful jars. Everything created a special atmosphere of coziness and warmth. A small online store turned into a serious business. Elena managed the business easily, as if she had been doing it all her life. Each post found a response from subscribers. Each client felt special. The geography of orders stretched from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok, and recently the first parcel flew to Prague. Natasha was sitting in the garden, absent-mindedly sorting through the clover stems. She remembered how her grandmother, planting these bushes, would say clover. It is stubborn, tenacious, like our family. No matter what you do, it will still grow. Natalia Alexandrovna. Aliona's voice brought her out of her reverie. The girl waved the tablet like a victory flag. We are invited to a festival in St. Prina, Petersburg. A big, international one. Looking at the flushed face of her assistant, Natasha suddenly clearly understood that the old house in the remote village was not just a roof over her head. It became a springboard to a new life. Grandma knew. All this time she knew that it was here, among the fragrant herbs and old apple trees, that her granddaughter would find her true self. She gave so much more than just a place to live. She gave meaning, a cause, joy, and Aliona, the little sister she never had. The wind swayed the apple tree branches. Bees buzzed in the grass. And the voices of visitors came from the open-end rooms. Natalia took a deep breath of the spicy aroma of herbs. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered. Thank you for everything. Story 2. You won't have it if I can't have it. When I declined to allow my brother to co-own my restaurant, he threatened. He set it on fire 9 days later. So I exacted my final retribution. Hello everyone, prior to the start of today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe. Since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity, it's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Okay. Reddit. My family surprised me by asking my unemployed brother to become a co-owner of my restaurant. When I declined, my father shouted and tossed his drink at me. Be mindful of your tone. In front of this family, you won't treat me disrespectfully. That was the day I permanently severed my links. Naturally. Though they weren't finished. This is how it transpired. I'm a 30-year-old man who has spent the last 8 years working in finance. My modest home on the south side of Kansas City is a fine location to live, and I paid $100 for it out of my own pocket. Years of working 60-hour weeks and meticulous planning allowed me to earn every dime. The dynamics in our home were quite evident while I was growing up. The golden kid was a 6-year-old man named Blake, and I was just 4 years younger than him. To my parents, Blake could do no wrong. Had a Ph.D. in mathematics. The instructor is working against him. Resigned from his third position in 6 months. The atmosphere at work wasn't encouraging. In the meantime, I was constantly watched. You must be more responsible. Be a better role model. Elderly brothers do that. I could repeat that garbage in my sleep, since I heard it so often. The problem is that it felt fine. So I didn't become accustomed to it. I grew accustomed to it since I discovered early on that I would be less disappointed if I had lower expectations of my parents. It was a matter of survival. My time in high school was really difficult. My parents did not attend my academic decathlon state finals, when I finished in second place. But Blake received a lot of acclaim for making it to JV basketball. The excuse was that Blake had to be taken to his game by someone. I received the silver medal when I returned home. I ended up keeping the medal in my desk drawer. Never brought up again. While Blake had a free ride to Mizzou from my parents, I worked 2 jobs to pay for my own tuition at Missouri State. As a graduation present, they even got him a brand new Civic. Me, we anticipate big things from you. And I received a solid handshake. Talk. I never felt seen in that house except for one individual. My granddad. Despite his lack of feeling and affection, he demonstrated love in meaningful ways. There was always a cup of black coffee waiting for me when I came in. Candy is unnecessary for a child like you. He would advise you to maintain your acuity. When I couldn't afford to replace my computer after it died at my first job, when I contacted the next day to thank him, a little sum of money showed up in my account. It's from my savings. He merely stated, just enough to save you from having to fight alone. It was never a huge thing to him. I never forgot it. But I never brought it up again. After serving in the military during World War II, my grandpa spent 40 years as a machinist. Fair yet as hard as nails. He showed me how to properly invest, fix a leaking faucet, and change my own oil. He told me to never depend on anybody else to help you construct your life. He attended all of my high school, college, and even financial certification ceremonies as we worked on his vintage Chevy in the garage. Every time, Dad would give me a card that had a $100 dollar and a simple message that said, "Proud of you." Brief. Easy. However, it was crucial. My granddad died 2 years ago. The only member of my family who ever appreciated me for who I was passed away. We met at Attorney Gavin's office for the will reading around a month following the funeral. My grandfather had carefully separated everything. My parents each received $100. Ling ling ling. And Blake and I each received $200. Ling ling ling. Blake and I would share 50/50 ownership of the home where my parents and Blake resided. The lawyer gave a clear explanation of my grandfather's logic. Because Blake has always been given preference by your parents, he could not rely on them to administer the estate in a fair manner. He was afraid Rowan would have nothing if he left everything in their hands. It was amazing to see the expressions on my parents' faces. My father's face became a striking shade of scarlet, while my mother's jaw literally hung open, unable to look into anyone's eyes. Blake simply gazed at his sneakers. It found out that only a few months before to his passing, my grandfather had sold his own home for $600. Ling ling ling. That was the source of the funds. He had meticulously prepared everything to make sure I wouldn't be left in the dark when he left. I knew right away what I intended to do with the $200. 000 when I put money into my account. I learned from working in finance that idle money quickly loses value. I thus made the decision to create a restaurant because rather than because I had a strong desire to cook. I thought it would be a wise investment that, with the right management, might bring in a consistent flow of revenue. I completed my assignment. I saw a need for high-end comfort cuisine in the Crossroads neighborhood after 3 months of study into the Kansas City restaurant industry. In addition to having reasonable foot traffic and rent, the site was close enough to the commercial district to draw in lunchgoers. In order to start the business, I invested around $180. Ling ling ling. I encountered Marcel, a seasoned chef, through a client, and I hired him. He was incredible. After receiving his training in New Orleans and working at a few upscale establishments, he desired a smaller setting where he could exercise more creative control. The eatery become both my business and his kitchen. I kept working at my day job, while I hired a manager I trusted to run front-of-house operations. I continued to perform my financial employment. I invited everyone, including Blake and my parents. When the restaurant debuted a month later, perhaps, I reasoned, they would be proud of my accomplishments at last. We had a full schedule for the first 2 weekends, and the establishment was immediately receiving good feedback from the community. Rather, in the midst of the festivities, my mother leaned over and remarked, "You ought to have collaborated with Blake on this. That's exactly what he's always wanted, to run a restaurant." As though my brother had somehow lost out on my accomplishment, Blake acted as like he owned the establishment, the whole opening night, directing the waitstaff how to do their duties, scolding the menu in front of Marcel, and loudly declaring that he was providing business advice. I grinned and remained silent. I was accustomed to it. The first half of the year was terrible. From 7 to 4, I worked in finance. And until midnight, I went directly to the restaurant. Dealing with everything from personnel concerns to supplier issues took up the whole weekend at the restaurant. It was worthwhile, even though I didn't take a day off for over 4 months. By the 8th month, we were receiving consistent business, receiving good reviews across the board, and even being included in the local newspaper as one of the top 10 new eateries in KC. I was creating something I could genuinely be proud of. And the company was making money sooner than I had anticipated. Blake spent less than a year spending $200, 000 on parties, VIP tables, renting sports vehicles, and burning away his fortune while I was starting a business. I learned about it via friends and social media posts that boasted about his high life and included images of him popping bottles at parties. His Instagram became a repository of bad financial choices. He would post about his new $5, 000 watch 1 week and then another. He smashed the tables on a weekend trip to Vegas. The next week, he was posing as though he had a leased Lamborghini. Finding out that he had been telling everyone the restaurant was a family business only made things worse. He even identified himself as the owner and invited possible business partners to supper. Later, Marcel informed me that Blake had given suppliers his personal card, stating that he was in charge of all the purchase choices. I was brought aside by my bar manager one evening, who gave me a credit card statement that had a $700 bill on it, which Blake had attempted to claim as owner expenditures. Blake just answered, "What's the big deal?" and shrugged when questioned. "We are related. All of the funds remain in the same pot." Then he conceived with his girlfriend. It seems that Camila, the girl, believed Blake to be a prosperous businessman. He informed her about this. When she discovered he was destitute and jobless, reality struck her hard. Blake continued to act entitled despite everything. The pregnancy, if anything, further increased his desire to take over my company. I was somewhere at the center of the actual family turmoil when it began. My mother contacted me on a Saturday morning almost a year ago, inviting me to attend a significant family event. About 20 people, largely from my mom's side, were crammed inside the house when I got there. It was clear from the setting that they were planning an intervention, but it wasn't the typical type. 2 vacant seats in the living room have been moved to face the sofa. Presumably, one for me and one beside my mom. Like a tribunal, the remainder of the family sat in a semicircle, observing me with the same judgmental gaze I had been used to growing up. My father stood by the hearth with his arms folded. Among the well-known faces, I saw 2 new men seated next to Blake, my cousin Jake, whom I hadn't seen in years, and his closest buddy Troy, a man with sleeve tattoos and a shaved head who had been in and out of jail for petty larceny. It seems that he had been staying at my parents' house for several months. After 10 minutes, my mother got up and declared that Camila was 3 months along with her pregnancy. The wedding was scheduled for the following month. I whispered a brief congrats to Blake as everyone cheered. Before my mother even said it, I could tell what was going to happen from the fake smiles that filled the room. Aunt Debbie continued to look expectantly between Blake and me. Uncle Tim was looking at his watch anxiously. I hadn't seen my cousin Karen in 3 years, but she suddenly seemed very interested in family matters. My mom wasn't finished, though. She turned to face me as she stood up once again. There will soon be a new member of our family. I know that starting a family is difficult, especially since Blake still lacks a steady job. But Blake and Camilla are embarking on a new journey. Then she gave me a direct look and revealed the truth. I know you've put in a lot of work, Rowan. I genuinely admire all that you have achieved. However, I want you to think more broadly today. Consider your brother. Consider the child that will soon enter your life. And there it was. I think you should make Blake a co-owner of your restaurant. After all, he needs a steady income, and family businesses should stay in the family. He deserves an equal share without having to put in any money. I could hear relatives nodding in agreement. One even said loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's right. Rowan's the older brother. He should take care of his own." The room felt like it was closing in. They weren't just waiting for my answer. They expected me to say yes, like it was already decided. I sat there for a full minute, staring at my glass. Then I looked up at my mother and said, "Are you serious? That restaurant is something I built with everything I had. I put $180,000 into it. I worked 20-hour weeks managing it. And now you're telling me I should just hand over half to Blake for nothing? I'm never going to agree to that." She fired back immediately, her voice dripping with entitlement. "Rowan, your brother is unemployed and about to become a father. We are related. It wouldn't even affect you to share. You're being utterly selfish. Can you let your nephew be born without someone caring for him?" I stood up, not worrying about the relatives staring. "Then where's the $200? $000 he inherited from Grandpa." Blake rushed in with a prearranged retort, his voice smooth with practiced innocence. "I invested it with a buddy, but the deal went through and I lost everything." I couldn't help but chuckle. "You're lying. You spent it all partying over the past year. Don't think I didn't know. Should I show everyone the photographs of you flinging money around at strip clubs? Or the invoices from the 3 motorcycles you bought and crashed?" Blake instantly dropped his head, but not before I glimpsed the flicker of anger in his eyes. Troy leaned over and muttered something to him while gazing at me before anyone could cut in. I turned to my parents. I'm not making him co-owner of my restaurant. While he was busy pissing away his money, I worked hard to build that business. Give me $200,000 for his portion if you really want it. He'll become a buddy of mine. You are free to do as you like. Hand it over to Blake. Give it to his child. I don't give a damn." My father leaped to his feet, snatched up his drink, and hurled it in my face. "Be mindful of your tone. You still have me as your dad. Furthermore, you will not treat me disrespectfully in front of this family." Debbie gasped when the room fell quiet. Even Blake appeared astonished, and Karen covered her mouth. I quietly picked up my coat, wiped my face with my sleeve, and proceeded to the door. "I appreciate you reminding me of my place in this family," I remarked, giving them all one more glance before leaving. I drove quietly home. My phone was constantly buzzing with calls and texts from different family members, some of whom were apologizing and others emphasizing the need of helping Blake. After the family get-together, I spent 2 weeks ignoring everyone. My parents kept calling and texting me. My mother would go on guilt trips one after the other. I didn't bring you up to be that egotistical and pretentious. All we're attempting to do is assist your brother in starting a family. My father was more straightforward. This is something you owe your brother. After the first week, I blocked their phones. But they began to appear at the restaurant and at my residence. During dinner service one evening, Blake and Troy barged in and made a big deal out of informing patrons that I was robbing my own family and that the restaurant should be half his beaten. They had to be escorted out for me. The employees began to feel anxious. After Blake arrived one evening and threatened to fire her once he took over, my host resigned. To avoid his visits, 2 servers asked for separate schedules. Although Marcel refused to back down, I could see that the ongoing turmoil was getting to him. I spoke with a lawyer about obtaining a restraining order, but he advised me that it would be challenging to enforce in the absence of any threats of violence. I had brought a cease and desist letter to my parents' house, which was the best they could provide. When my mother arrived at my office building 3 days later, she caused such a commotion in the lobby that security had to remove her out. That afternoon, I received a call from my employer, who was worried about how personal matters were influencing my work environment. I promised him that it wouldn't happen again. But I could see that things had become worse a week or so before to the fire. Marcel stormed in as I was in the back office taking inventory. Blake and the hostess are arguing outside. He is insisting on being seated at a table that has been reserved. When I left, I discovered Blake getting in the way of our 2-year-old hostess while high as a kite. "Leave now. You're no longer welcome here." I said, "You're screwed." He made a slur. "I should be here. Dad was correct about you. You have always been a self-centered jerk." I spoke with a level tone. "I'll call the police if you don't leave now." He rushed at me at that moment. Plates and glasses shattered on the floor as we slammed into a table. As we battled, customers scurried away. Despite being intoxicated, Blake was still able to strike me in the jaw. I pinned his arms and wrestled him to the ground. "Do you believe that you are superior to me?" he spit. "You've always done so. I'll show you. Though, if you tamper with me, you'll see what happens." As they hauled him out, security tore us apart. Blake yelled, "You won't have it if I can't have it." Do you hear me? That evening, I reported the attack and the threat to the police. While taking witness accounts, the cops clarified that they could only arrest him with simple assault and trespassing in the absence of additional proof of a real arson scheme. The next morning, Blake was freed on bond. Then there was silence. Blake was not to be seen for a whole week. No threats. No calls. Not a show. Began to reflect. After viewing the police report, he may have backed off. Perhaps he had finally come to the realization that he couldn't use fear to get what he desired. I ought to have been more aware. The establishment saw immediate repercussions. After learning of the fight, a number of bookings were canceled. Yelp reviews began to surface that mentioned the awkward family turmoil. To stand at the door during work hours, I had to employ a security guard, a cost I hadn't planned for. Around 2 a.m, 9 days later, Marcel called me in a panic. "The eatery is ablaze. The security firm called me just now. Now there's the fire department." I hurried across town, racing every red light from 3 blocks away. After throwing on some clothing, the orange glow against the night sky was visible to me. By the time I arrived, fire vehicles had closed off the street, their lights blazing over the faces of the people who had gathered to watch. My restaurant was on fire when I hurried over. Despite the firemen's best efforts, it was obvious that there would be significant damage. I watched as all I had created was destroyed by fire. As daylight dawned, I was contacted by the fire chief. Unfortunately, there isn't much left inside. But we have it controlled. Do you have any clue how it began? I informed him about Blake's danger. The police report. I said, I know it was him, but I can't prove it. Blake's threat and the altercation at the restaurant were among the things I mentioned in my statement to the police and fire investigators the next morning. Investigator Reynolds, a female investigator assigned to the investigation, made thorough notes regarding the previous family dispute. We'll do a thorough investigation, she stated. However, arson cases sometimes take months to develop due to their complexity. Beyond a reasonable doubt, we must prove not just that it was arson, but also who committed it. I contacted Blake once I got out of the police station. The third ring caught his attention. Hello, my friend. What is going on? He spoke in an informal tone, as if we were just getting acquainted. You are well aware of the situation. I have no idea what you're discussing. The smirk was almost audible over the phone. Last night, the restaurant caught fire. A pause. SH times T. That's awful. Insurance. Put a lid on it. Blake. Stop the nonsense. I spent the entire night at home. Ask Troy. He fell into my couch. One more pause. It may have been electrical. You know, the wiring in those ancient buildings breaks. This is something you will regret. He laughed. What do you regret sleeping at home while your investment was lost? I wish you luck in demonstrating otherwise. I knew two things when I hung up. Without a doubt, Ed did. He also believed that he was untouchable. That would be his error. The fire investigation team gathered evidence, examined burn patterns, and collected samples from the scene. They formally categorized it as arson 3 weeks later. The rear door had been smashed into, and an accelerant had been utilized in many places. They missed one of the security cameras, which had been turned off. Marcel had put up a new camera to keep an eye on food delivery in the kitchen. There were two males in the poor quality video. One had the appearance of Troy, and the other Blake. They were lighting a match after painstakingly dumping stuff on the counters and flooring. Their faces, nevertheless, were too blurry for a reliable identification. Dealing with insurance adjusters, consoling displaced workers, and answering incessant queries from suppliers and customers kept me in a trance for the next 3 weeks. It had a serious financial impact. Even though I had insurance, there was a hefty deductible. And for the next 3 months, the coverage for business disruption was limited. The inquiry went on. Every week, sometimes every day, I got in touch with Detective Reynolds. They were doing rigorous case building, questioning possible witnesses, and monitoring mobile phone tower data. Since arson cases automatically result in fraud evaluations, my insurance company also dispatched its own investigators, who required copious evidence. My parents unexpectedly visited my home around 2 months into the probe. I was going over paperwork for the insurance company on a Sunday morning. They stood there as if they hadn't slept in days as I opened the door. Blake has to be discussed. As she pushed by me into the living room, my mother spoke. My dad followed, his expression stern. Yesterday, the police visited our home to inquire about Blake's whereabouts on the night of the fire. I stood with my arms folded and shut the door. How would you like me to handle that? The voice of my mother broke. He's being treated like a criminal by them. Rovan, even if he may have erred, he is still your brother. An error? What I was hearing was unbelievable. He set my business on fire. Every employee's livelihood was devastated by him. It's not an error. It's a crime. Son. My father came forward. We want the charges to be dropped. Inform the authorities that you do not wish to pursue this. Blake might spend a lot of time behind bars. Excellent. Flatly, I replied. He ought to be. My mom broke down in tears. How come you're so icy? Where is your family? Are you indifferent to the harm this is causing us? Your father has extremely high blood pressure. I have trouble falling asleep. And who is to blame for that? Did this not happen to me? I asked Blake. My dad yelled, "If only you had been there for him when he needed you." Just stop there, I interrupted him. You're not allowed to put this on me. Blake made his own decisions as an adult. You are. Too. You've tolerated his actions all of his life. So you're shocked when he burns down a building because he didn't get his way. My mom took hold of my arm. Rovan, please aid your brother right now if you ever love this family. He is expecting a child. If your father is incarcerated, do you want your niece or nephew to grow up with him? I moved away from her. Before committing arson, Blake ought to have considered it. He's always made you jealous. My dad said in a chilly tone, "Isn't this your opportunity to finally ruin him?" I approached and held open the door. You ought to go. In my opinion, you would make your granddad feel embarrassed. As they left, my mother spoke. You weren't brought up to ignore your family by him. No, I answered. He taught me to advocate for myself, something I never learned from you. I sat at my kitchen table and gazed at the wall for a while after they had departed. What I already knew was validated by their presence. Regardless of what Blake accomplished, they would always pick him above me. They saw me as the villain since I didn't give up my life to protect him from the repercussions. Unexpectedly, 4 months after the fire, a breakthrough was made. 2 streets away from the eatery, the proprietor of a gas station came forward with pristine video footage. In plain sight, Blake and Troy had used credit cards bearing their identities to buy and fill 2 gas cans 1 hour prior to the incident. Blake's texts detailing the scheme were discovered by the police when they carried out search warrants at their homes. He cannot have half of the restaurant if I cannot. Additionally, they found garments that had accelerant residues similar to those used in the fire. Almost 5 months after the fire, Blake and Troy were taken into custody when the district attorney's office filed official charges: second-degree arson, conspiracy, criminal mischief, and insurance fraud were among the allegations. In exchange for less charges, Troy immediately began negotiating a plea agreement to testify against Blake. Detective Reynolds phoned to inform me that they were in custody while I was at work. Blake was going to pay the price at last. I traveled to the county prison where Blake was being held the day following his arrest. When they took him into the visitor's room, I had to see his face. He had a trashy appearance, wearing an orange jumpsuit, unshaven, and with bloodshot eyes. However, he smiled at me right away. He leaned back in his chair and murmured, "Big brother, come, save me." I simply gazed at him. Why? It was more than simply my restaurant. 26 employees relied on it for their livelihood. The smile vanished as he leaned forward. Because you've always had everything handed to you and you're a selfish jerk. Do you really believe you're that superior to me? It was presented to me, and I nearly laughed. I earned all I own. The person who has had everything handed to him throughout his life is you. You're screwed. He spit. I might have become your companion. Just one signature. It would have just required that. You had to keep it all for yourself. Though, I kept it. Silently, I said. I used my own funds and labor to construct it. And it's gone now. Oh, he said. That smile is coming back. How does that feel? I got up, knowing I had taken it from you. Blake, you'll spend years behind bars. Was it worthwhile? His grin wavered. My parents will take me out. They always do. I turned to go. Not now. I met with attorney Gavin after visiting Blake to discuss the house my grandpa had given to Blake and myself. On that front, too, it was time to take action. What choices do I have about the property that Blake and I jointly own? I explained the problem and then asked, given that you and Blake share ownership of the property, Gavin went over the will once again. Given Blake's present legal issues, you are entitled to compel a partition sale. This is a good moment. If both owners choose to sell, Your parents have no legal right to stay. And how soon can we have this resolved? Knowing what I was about to do, I asked. Gavin responded, I can submit the petition today. We might be able to speed up the procedure given the situation. Your parents will probably argue against it. But they won't have much of a case given Blake's legal status. Do it, I urged. Additionally, Gavin clarified, the district attorney's office handles the criminal matter. The state is pursuing the case. But as the victim, you will be expected to testify and submit proof. I would advise you to assist the prosecutors to the fullest. Make sure they know how this incident affected you and your staff. During the course of the following several months, that's precisely what I did. I gave the prosecution all the things they need. Financial documents demonstrating my restaurant investment, payroll data from employees to show the impacted livelihoods, as well as thorough descriptions of Blake's threats and prior actions. I even made a thorough chronology of the events that preceded the fire, along with images of Blake's extravagant spending on social media, documents detailing his disturbances at the eatery, as well as eyewitness accounts from staff members he had mistreated. The wheels of justice, meantime, churned slowly. It would take over a year for Blake's case to get to trial. His lawyer said they needed more time to prepare his defense and filed move after motion seeking delays. I was cautioned by the district attorney that this was common practice, particularly when the evidence was overwhelming. While they looked into every facet of the fire to make sure I wasn't involved, I concentrated on rebuilding during this 8-month-long insurance claim procedure. They stated it's standard protocol. But when you're the victim, it's really annoying. I had to submit years' worth of financial data, go through many interviews, and deal with a ton of paperwork. It took 4 months for the house's petition action to be processed by the courts. Naturally, my parents opposed it, arguing that I was experiencing difficulty and attempting to postpone. But the judge finally decided in my favor. Blake and I had to divide the cash from the sale of the house. Blake's portion was placed in a court-managed trust until the criminal case was over because of his incarceration. My parents had to leave the home they had occupied for many years. I had grown up feeling like a second-class citizen in that house. They had to drastically reduce their size. I was not pleased to see the moving trucks. Just a weird feeling of completion. 5 months after the fire, the house sold for $500. Ling ling ling. I received the $250. 000. That was my portion right away. As possible compensation for the fire damages. Blake's part was held in escrow while his case was being handled. Camila gave birth to a child they named Tyler at this time. He was someone I never met. I received photos from my parents with passive-aggressive remarks. Your nephew. You turn your back on your family by refusing to recognize them. Without reacting to the financial fallout from the fire, I erased them all. Was cruel. I had to take money out of my savings to support some of my suffering employees while I awaited the insurance settlement. As we prepared our return, Marcel remained faithful and declined offers from other eateries. When we rebuilt, I offered him a share in the new business. Blake's trial date finally came about 11 months after the fire. Troy had already agreed to a 3-year plea bargain in exchange for his testimony by that point. The actual trial lasted only 4 days, which was remarkably short. The evidence was overwhelming. Troy's testimony, the text messages, the gas station receipts, the surveillance film, and the forensic evidence from the fire site. On the second day, I testified about the argument at the restaurant, Blake's threats, and the family get-together. Blake's lawyer attempted to portray it as a family dispute, exaggerated, implying that Blake had no real intention of setting the restaurant on fire. Simply frightened me. The jury rejected it. They returned with a guilty decision on all charges after only 6 hours of deliberation. Blake was found guilty of arson and other offenses and given an 8-year jail sentence. After 5 years, with the prospect of release. In addition, The judge mandated that he make amends for any losses that his insurance did not cover. He would receive around $150,000 from his portion of the house's sales. Blake gave me a hateful glare as the bailiff escorted him away. My mother sobbed into her hands as my parents sat in the row behind him. My father's countenance was blank as he looked straight ahead. They gave me absolutely no acknowledgement. My mother texted me to ask to meet the day after the sentencing. I concurred. They were sitting at a corner table when I got there. My mom's eyes were puffy and red. My dad appeared to have aged by a decade. You achieved your goal. As soon as I sat down, my father said, "Are you content now?" I refused to fall for the ruse. None of this was what I wanted. Blake made his decisions. My mother's voice broke as she said, 8 years. Because you were unable to forgive him, our son will spend 8 years in prison. Pardon him. I shook my head, not believing it. He set fire to something. He ruined my company. What were your expectations? We thought you would be a brother. My dad leaned across the table and growled. You had the option to request leniency. You may have explained to the judge that it was only a family conflict. It was more than a family quarrel, I said, maintaining a level voice. He did a grave offense. I resisted as my mother grabbed for my hand. He is still your brother. Though, you are a human being, and that's meant to make things okay. I inquired. We've had enough of you. With a voice trembling with anger. My father spoke. I don't have a son. From our perspective, we currently only have one child, and he is incarcerated. As I turned to go, I answered, perhaps pay him a visit sometimes. He will require all available assistance. I was followed to the door by my mother's voice. Never get in touch with us again. This family is devastated because of you. I left without turning around. I'm experiencing an odd feeling of relief. 2 weeks after the sentencing, the final connections were severed. The whole amount was eventually made available by the insurance company. 25,000 for inventory loss. 45,000 for business disruption. And $230,000 for the facility and equipment, along with my portion of the selling of the house. I now needed to reconstruct $550. Ling ling ling. It took a while to rebuild the eatery. It took 3 months to find a new site that worked. Enacrete. I chose a location in the River Market District. Better visibility and foot traffic, but more costly. It took an additional 2 months to obtain clearances and licenses. It took 6 months to build and renovate. I kept in touch with my former workers during this process, providing them advances and assisting them in finding temporary employment, with the assurance that they would be given their positions back when we reopened. Marcel stayed at my side the whole time. He tested cuisine dishes at pop-up events and assisted in designing the new kitchen. He never once faltered in his dedication to our objective. And we ran to maintain our reputation in the community. I brought on a new general manager who had expertise reviving failing eateries, Derek, a man who had previously worked for several large chains, desired something more intimate. He brought in a group of servers he had previously dealt with and knew would deliver excellent service, although it cost more. The new location had better parking and visibility. The kitchen infrastructure was already in place because the previous tenant had been a failing gastropub, which saved a lot of money on renovations. I arranged a 5-year lease with a buyout option. In the end, run. After hearing my narrative, 3 separate investors approached me. Despite all that had transpired throughout the restoration, they provided stock in return for capital. I declined each one. I wasn't going to cede any control of my company after Blake's incident. Regardless of how alluring the proposition appeared, our new restaurant eventually opened 18 months after the fire. Larger, more aesthetically pleasing, and situated in a more noticeable area. Better kitchen appliances. A handmade wood-fired grill. A true bar with handcrafted drinks. and a private dining area for parties were all upgrades. Marcel combined Kansas City cuisine with his experience in New Orleans to create a menu, comfort food that was elevated and in high demand. I had no idea how amazing opening night would be. There is a 2-week waiting and a line out the door for every table. Positive reviews and pictures of meals went viral on social media. Detective Reynolds and her husband entered the dining room as I was making my way around welcoming guests. After I sat them at our nicest table, she added, "I thought you might like an update. I've heard that your parents had to sell their car in order to pay the rent after your brother's appeal was rejected last week. Evidently, Blake's legal defense consumed all of their resources with no sense of gratification or pity." I nodded. "I appreciate you informing me. Tonight's dinner is free." A table of regulars from the previous location struck up a conversation with me as I went about my rounds. When we announced the reopening, they were among the first to make reservations. "Come back stronger," one of them remarked, lifting his glass. Overhearing, everyone in the dining area participated in the toast. I needed a moment to gather myself, so I went into the kitchen. We sold $15,000 that night, which was more than twice as much as we had at the previous site. We had to create a waiting list for weekend reservations by the 3rd month since we were making a steady profit. Marcel firmly shook his hand when I gave him a 15% share in the company. Derek received 5%, with performance-based bonuses possible. These choices weren't only astute business choices. They were about assembling a group of people who cared about our achievement. I got a letter from Camilla a year after we reopened. She clarified that she was raising their baby by herself after she and Blake split up while he was incarcerated. She inquired if I would be interested in seeing my nephew and apologized for her part in the family conflict. I haven't made up my mind yet. I still don't have a relationship with my parents. On my birthday and Christmas, they would send me cards, generally with guilt-ridden words about forgiveness and family. I don't answer. The eatery is still doing well in the interim. We've hired 3 additional cooks to work under Marcel, added lunch service, and are thinking about building a second site across town. Everything I had constructed was supposed to be destroyed by the fire, but it made me rebuild something better instead. Marcel later handed out beverages to rise from the ashes after the final patrons had left and the workers had completed cleaning up. "Pouring," he said, as we exchanged glasses. I took at my new restaurant, which was flourishing in spite of all Blake had attempted to ruin. Getting even isn't always the greatest form of retaliation. While they remain mired in the mess they made, it is progressing and thriving.